It was Lee Tully who talked to me about coming to speak to the group here. And so thanks, Lee, if you're out there, because I love to talk. And and so you'll find out tonight how much I love to talk. I did a little PowerPoint that kind of walks through some of the terminology. And I've got a couple of videos to share. It might be a little wonky getting from PowerPoint to video and back and forth, but you'll forgive me, right? Because we're just Americans. It's not like this is Carnegie Hall or anything. So, but before I start, and let me get the slideshow started. Why is it not showing up the slides to start? Oh, I know. Screen. There it is. Okay, give me a sec here. There it is. Okay, so before I start with the slideshow, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So as you know, my name is Kathleen Dickson. We moved here in 2002, and our first taste of the Oregon coast was learning to hunt wild mushrooms, wild edible mushrooms. And that's what got me started in local food. There are an amazing variety of wild mushrooms in our forest just a couple miles from here up in the Coast Range. And we met some mushroom pickers and we landed with them camping at Second Bridge. This was the year of the Biscuit Fire. And so they had all been pushed down from the Forest Service campgrounds that they stayed at. And they were all on Second Bridge, the river bar. So we met them, we moved back up into the camps with them. We learned how to pick these mushrooms. I worked for a buyer for a few years. We transported wild mushrooms for a year. And that's what got me started. From there, we discovered about local peaches, meaning the peaches from Medford, specifically Harry and David. They were Harry and David rejects, which I always thought was kind of funny. If you ever have gotten a gift box from Harry and David, you know, they're perfect, right? The peaches are perfect, the pears are perfect. Well, the rejects, they're maybe a little smaller, or they're a little bigger, or they're a little riper, or a little less ripe. They throw them all out. They throw them all out. And the guy we met, his name was Steve, if I remember, worked there. And at the time, this was almost 20 years ago. At the time, they would let their employees take whatever they wanted of these rejects. So he would take two 2,000-pound bins home and sell them from his home in Medford. So we met him and he said, you can come over and you can pick through these rejects and you can take some home, pay us a little bit, because you know, they were making a couple extra bucks on the side. And then we brought them home and sold them here. So we would get them 20 years ago for 25 cents a pound. And we would bring them here and we would sell them for, we probably started at $1 a pound. We made the mistake, this is kind of a roundabout way, but you're gonna love this story. We made the mistake the very first time of bringing an entire bin home, 2,000 pounds. And we couldn't process, we didn't sell them fast enough, couldn't process them. We're selling them on the side of the road in Gasky. My husband's trying to slice them and put them in baggies to freeze them. We ended up losing about half that bin, and that's the last time we did it that way. From that point forward, we brought our own boxes and we stood there fighting off the bees every Thursday. And we boxed up about, a couple 100 pounds of peaches and brought them over here and sold them. That was my introduction to local food. And for somebody who was born and raised in Wyoming and grew up far from the bread basket, if you will, it's fruit basket really, of California, I had no idea what a lot of food was supposed to taste like, including peaches. Every peach I'd ever eaten came from the store. And I learned through our work as OtterBees that store-bought fruits like that, tomatoes, tend to get picked very hard and very green and then oftentimes sprayed with an ethylene, which is a naturally occurring compound. All fruits give off ethylene. So they would spray this stuff with ethylene to make it ripen before they would sell it. But if the flavor, if the sugar isn't in these fruits before they're picked, then it's not going to taste good no matter what it looks like. So that was how I was used to eating until I moved here. And I will always remember Steve and his Harry and David reject peaches for introducing me to the glory of food, the way it's supposed to taste, from local farms, from local producers, in season, the way it should be. So let me go ahead and jump into this. I understand this is my first time with this group, and so I understand that y'all like to kind of talk back and forth, and I love that. So we will do questions anytime. Just interrupt me.
Put them in the chat.
Or put them in the chat, yes. And if you're on, yeah, that's right, because we got Zoom people. Yeah. So put it in the chat, and Bill will read them off. If you're here in the room, just jump in anytime, and we will talk. And if we get off topic and we go down a rabbit hole, that's fine with me. I made this little PowerPoint to kind of keep me on track and to try and share what I know with you. So without further ado, you've seen my title page, that's good enough. So I need to first of all close this little thing so I can actually read. The top line, let me be clear, I am no climate change expert. I know food. You guys all know more than me. You're much more involved in understanding what's going on than I am. I know what I hear on TV. I've learned a lot from doing some research, trying to see how local food and climate change dovetails. But I'm not going to be talking climate change. I'm going to be talking about eating locally. And as my little sentence here says, I believe that eating locally is a good way to help to mitigate some of the problems that industrial agribusiness causes. Greenhouse gas emissions and the like. There are a lot of other reasons to eat locally. It's better for your health. It's better for the economy. It tastes better. It feels better. But that's, you know, you guys are concerned about climate change, and definitely there are good reasons to eat locally as a way to mitigate climate change. So first of all, what do I mean by local food? Local is a very ambiguous word, and it can mean just about anything. The local food movement is a collaborative effort to build more locally based, self-reliant food economies, one in which sustainable food production, processing, distribution, and consumption is integrated to enhance the economic, environmental, and social health of a particular place. That's Wikipedia. So basically, local food can mean just about anything. You can describe it the way you want. What it really means is a place where food comes from. It can be your backyard. It can be 100 miles from here. It can be an entire state. People have defined local in a number of different ways. The word I like to use, and the one that Bill used in his promotion about this, was locavore. People call themselves locavores when they are interested in eating locally. A locavore is someone who eats food grown or produced within their local food shed. We'll go into food shed in just a minute. So if you're a locavore, you shop your farmer's market. You maybe belong to a CSA. If there are farm stands in your area, you go out there to buy some of your produce. You maybe buy at a local food collaborative or a food co-op. Locavore was coined by Jessica Prentice in San Francisco in 2005. And there is a pretty good video out there that shows her, that kind of walks through this locavore movement, which I'll share in a handout that I'll email to everybody. I was gonna use it, but I had 5 videos and somebody didn't need 5 videos, so I pulled a few. So anyway, she used it as she coined the word to describe and promote the practice of eating a diet consisting of food harvested from within a particular area. Back in 2005, locavores ate from within a 100-mile radius, but keep in mind, this is San Francisco where the word was coined, and around San Francisco are an amazing number of farms and producers and ranches. And so it was easy to say, okay, 100 miles is local. Up here, it's, if you want to encompass all of the amazing food that we can get within a day's drive, you know, you can, like our company, OtterBees, we consider local to be 200 miles. Used to be 150. And then we started getting some of our produce and some of our food from Roseburg area. And so I expanded it just a little bit to allow for that extra drive. As the crow flies, it's still probably 100 miles, but we aren't crows. So driving there, it's about 175 miles to Roseburg. Like I say, it started out to being within 100 miles, but it has since expanded. This is my own number. I think a locavore could be a person that eats from within 250 miles of home. I don't think I have this in here. No, I don't. The federal government considers local to be anything within 400 miles. And I think that's intended to encompass entire states because, for instance, there's a really good website here in Oregon known as OregonTastes.com. And I'll share all this stuff with y'all. Oregon Taste, everything made, grown, produced in Oregon is on OregonTastes.com. Well, that's what they're shooting for. OtterBee's is on OregonTastes.com. So locavorism has its roots in the organic agricultural movement. And for the most part, local food is also organic food. But organic is not the focus word, if you will. It's not a reason to buy. For instance, you can buy something that's organic that was grown in China, and that's not necessarily near as good as something that may not be strictly organic, but that's grown in Langlois. And so for me, I have never worried as much about whether or not something's organic, especially certified organic. Our small farms, none of them are certified. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's a major pain. It's really better for the giant farms. Certified organic is, I don't know, it's for the, what would you call them, industrial organic agribusiness? That's what certified organic is for. But everything that I sell is local, and most local foods are organic or very close to it. There's a term that my OtterBee's customers will know, my CSA members will know, called IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management. And it's a method by which farmers use the least invasive, least destructive is not the right word, but they use as little as they can get away with to grow their food. So they start the season, say they grow peaches. So they start the season and they see, okay, our trees every year get invaded by the codling moth. And so every year during the dormant season, they will spray a dormant oil on the trees, not on the fruit, on the trees. And what that does is it smothers this bug. And so the bug doesn't reproduce and we don't have any problems. Then as the season progresses and summer goes along, they watch their fruit. And as long as their fruit's not being attacked by an enormous amount of pests, that's all they do. That dormant spray is the only thing they do. And they sell their peaches, and every now and then an earwig is in them, or a split pit, or maybe a bug or two has gotten in them, but they don't spray the fruit. Other practices include cleaning up the orchard afterwards, picking up all the fruit that falls, burning all the prunings, etc. A lot of different ways to keep the pest and fungus problems to a minimum. That's what IPM is. So a lot of the farms in our area are either organic or IPM. But like it says here, local foods may not all be organic, but they are considered by their advocates to be superior, given that fruits and vegetables conform to the seasons, are picked at peak ripeness, and meat animals can be raised on pastures rather than vast feedlots. That's from the California magazine back in 2009, the Locavore's Dilemma. I mean, that's what that's how I eat. I eat local. It's not always organic. I'm not that concerned about it. I'm definitely concerned about it being local. And if I can get it here, I will buy it here versus buying it from the store, versus buying organic from the store, versus going into the valley. If I can get it here, I'm going to get it here. So, okay, first video. Let's see how this works. We are going to, is it on the screen?
It seems to be coming up.
Okay, then let's see. Oh, I know. You share. Now is it on screen? There it is. Okay, let's see if this works.
When we think about global warming, we think about transportation, we think about how we heat our houses. But in fact, how we eat has just as big an impact on climate change. The average item of food in America has traveled 1,500 miles from the farm to your plate. It's burned up an incredible amount of fossil fuel just to get there. If you're eating lettuce, say, in New York, that's been grown in California, one of those bags of pre-washed mixed lettuce, it takes 56 calories of fossil fuel energy to deliver 1 calorie of food energy to your plate. For the consumer to understand how much energy goes into their food, I think all they have to understand is, if it's local, it's less, and if it is unprocessed. A lot of the energy in our food comes from processing. All the complicated steps needed to make a Twinkie, all use vast amounts of energy. There are a great many other benefits to eating locally besides conserving energy. There is, I think, the very important benefit of keeping farmers in business. Farmers add a lot to a community. They have great wisdom about the natural world. And then there is the view. There's a wonderful bumper sticker in Europe called Eat Your View. And the premise is that if you don't support these agricultural landscapes around you, they will be sprawled. They will be covered with houses and highways and shopping malls. And the way to keep them open is to eat from the farms that constitute that view. And that's true. I mean, that's how you preserve those agricultural landscapes, is eating from those farms.
Okay. Let me change my view. Perfect. We practiced this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was Michael Pollan, one of my all-time favorite authors. He's written a number of books about eating local. Let me turn the lights back on. And that particular, one of my favorite quotes of him is from The Omnivore's Dilemma. If I remember right, he goes out and he learns how to eat from a number of different perspectives. At one point, he's hunting mushrooms with some friends of his. It's a great book. If you haven't ever read Michael Pollan, please do. Everything he writes is fabulous. One of his other favorite sayings is, eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables. I believe is how he does it. The idea being the more processed a food is, the less healthy it is. So let's first define local. I mentioned that we were going to go into this a little more. The definition definitely differs depending on who's defining it, which causes some problems. If you're in the grocery store and you're looking at labels and it says, locally grown, and then you look and it's like, well, it's grown in Oregon. Okay, where in Oregon? How far away was it grown? It could have been 300 miles away or not. Local is a very ambiguous word. There we are. Congress in 2008 considered that local produce must travel less than 400 miles from its origin or else stay within the state to be considered local. If distance is the deciding factor, sometimes you'll have food that is, and this happens here, there'll be cranberries grown on the coast. They'll be shipped up to Portland, they'll be processed, then they'll be brought back down here. That's not really local if you're, if you're trying to minimize your food miles, if you're trying to keep climate change, mitigate climate change, that's not really going to do it in my mind. And then there's also food that can be grown in one region. That's not what I already said, isn't it? Oh, I know. And then also there's food that is grown here and then it's taken to a big distribution center and it's all aggregated there and then it's all shipped right back out. Same kind of deal. Processing, same thing. Dried cranberries are another good example. The cranberries might be grown in Bandon, but they're all the way down in Ventura to be dried and processed, and then they're shipped all over the place. So it kind of depends. You got to know what you want. If you want to eat food that's only from within 150 miles of here, that never leaves here and comes back to you, then you just learn what to look for, and you don't buy anything that's been done to. We sell a dried cranberry from Vincent Family Cranberries. That's why I use them as an example. They are grown in Bandon, but before they get to you through us, they have gone to either Portland or Ventura to be dried and packaged and boxed, and then they come back. And so it's local, but it's, it's a little not. So customers out there. Linda's a customer, she understands. So maybe rather than use just the word local, since local is such an easy word to play with, we should say local food shed. My friend Kathy Bowden is the one who taught me about this concept. She works for the South Coast Watershed Council. And a watershed is a region whereby all the water that those people drink comes to. So our watershed includes the Chetco, the Windchuck, the Rogue, all of those are watersheds. The water's coming down from the mountains and it's coming down to here. So food shed is the same kind of concept. A food shed is the region where your food is grown. So for us, and this is my own personal definition, our food shed includes the Rogue Valley, the Umpqua Valley, the area in California down to Eureka, Humboldt County, and the area up in Coos Bay, Coos County, because That encompasses about 150 miles. You can drive to any one of those places in a day. You can visit those farms whenever you want. And that's what I see as local. When everything's transparent and everything is accessible, that's what local is to me. That's what my local food shed means. So the definition, specific definition is when food production is considered from the perspective of a region's climate, soil, watershed, species, and local agri-systems. We could make our food sheds smaller if we wanted to, but then we'd have a harder time, say, eating peaches or tomatoes or corn, because all of that stuff doesn't grow well here. It can be grown, but with an awful lot of hard work and sometimes inputs. It makes just as much sense to get those things from the valley where they're grown easily and bring them here and include that on our food shed. Same with them. Anybody from the valley should include the coast as part of their food shed, because otherwise, how do they get seafood? You know, and it's within what, 2.5 hours from Medford to here. And so we're their food shed, they're our food shed. A food shed unifies place and people, or nature with society. It's like Michael Pollan said earlier, it's eating your view. This is our view, and this is where we should be eating from, the places that we see around us. Okay, and so this video, I stuck this one in here because thinking of in terms of food shed versus local, California is not considered, Rebecca, when Oregon Tastes, for instance, chooses a food producer to put on their website, they don't consider California to be included because it's not Oregon. But for us here, California is a mere 7 miles away. So I consider it part of our local food shed. And so this particular video here talks about one of our local producers. And let's see, I think I have to share the screen again, don't I?
On a lawn that looks like this, but your lawn.
Stop. Okay.
See that.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, the stupid ad. Okay, let's just get past it.
Looks a little bit more like this, then you should click right here and check out.
Okay.
We are honored to announce Alexander Family Farm is the first and only dairy in the U.S. to be verified by the Savory Institute and invited by the Regenerative Organic Alliance to join their pilot program. Blake and Stephanie Alexander set out over 25 years ago to bring healthy, old-fashioned practices and values to their new farm. They directed their 5 generations of farming know-how into a singular focus on the health of their ecosystem, and they knew it depends on the soil. More than 2 decades later, their result is a shining, large-scale agriculture example of regenerative hope. With 4,200 cows grazing and 35,000 hens roaming on 4,300 organic acres, the Alexander soil has gone from 2% organic matter to 8 and 15% organic matter of rich soil teeming with life. Through the Alexander's regenerative efforts, the land has recovered critical coho salmon habitat and nearly extinct Aleutian geese, and is home to a large herd of Roosevelt elk, bald eagles, and hundreds of smaller species.
The concept that the soil is where it all starts. There's organic matter in here and is building at a really fast rate because of the management that we're utilizing here on the farm. Just to put a few numbers to it, 20 years ago when we started measuring our organic matters, it was about 2%. Here in the last couple of years, organic matters were coming in at 7 and 8%, all the way up to 15%. And 50% of that organic matter goes to it is carbon. So here we are on the farm sequestering carbon, making beautiful soil, beautiful grasses, and forage for our beautiful cattle that are then converting it to A2 milk that we're selling under the label Alexander Family Farm.
The family continues to have a singular focus on a healthy ecosystem that supports their dairy and egg businesses and creatures great and small, and their community and customers.
Doesn't that just look like you could go down there and just check that place? You can too. I don't know if you know the trails over in Tallwood Dunes, but there's a really cool trail. You get to it from the Mill Road at Mill Beach Road, and you walk and you walk and you walk, and it's a Native American site, and it's on the edge of their farm. So you get to that, and then you can see out there, and you can see all their cows and all, and it's really cool. The whole area is beautiful. Alexander Dairy, obviously we sell it at OtterBee's, but they have a food farm store at the farm, and you can buy their milk and eggs at Wild Rivers Market in Crescent City, at the farmers market here in town, and they just created a more pasteurized version of their milk that now is sold in Whole Foods. So, you know, these guys, the reason I shared them is because, first of all, they're local. They're a local farm, and we should be drinking their milk and using their cream and their eggs, if that's the kind of thing that you all eat. But also because of the regenerative organic nature of their growing, their ranching practices. That kind of ties in well, I thought, with climate change. Because as I was searching for things to share with you all, I kept running into this regenerative agriculture. And I know that there's a big issue with huge agribusiness ranching operations, meat growing, that's really affecting climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. I understand that the numbers just came out, new numbers just came out, and it went from 20% to 40% because they started to take into account all the rest of it. It's not just the methane that the cows fart, but it's also everything it takes, the processing, the distribution, the trucking, the whole thing. And I do agree that as especially Americans, we eat way too much meat. And so I'm not a proponent of eating a whole ton of meat. I am, however, a proponent of regenerative agriculture. I do think that I try to think realistically, and I realize that we will never become a nation of vegetarians. But if we could at least teach people to choose their meat sources better, and if we could help farmers and ranchers, and they're getting on board like you would not believe. I found video after video from farmers and ranchers that have switched to this particular process because it makes more sense. These folks are stewards of the land, first and foremost. They've lived on these lands. The Alexanders, this is like they're in 4th, 5th, 6th generation now. They have to take care of their soil and their land, or they just move on. In fact, one of the videos I was listening to, they said the Western expansion happened because we would exhaust the soil out east and we would move further west. Well, we don't know where else to go. We are as far west as we can go. So regenerative agriculture makes really good sense. And I did want to share it tonight because I didn't know how much of this is out there for the general public. Like I say, the ranchers are on board. So regenerative agriculture is a conservation and rehabilitation approach to food and farming system. I found that in the most cases, people who use this or who talk about this are ranchers. A lot of them do what's kind of known as a holistic, self-sustaining, closed circle kind of thing. Joel Salatin's a big fan of that. You're going to hear him as the last video. So what it is you've got cows, and the cows, they eat grass on this one plot. They're surrounded by high-tech electric fence, just a single wire is all they need. And they stay on this grass for a little while, and then the farm moves them, the rancher moves them to another one. And then right behind them comes the chickens. And the chickens get all the little bugs out of the poop that the cows have dropped, right? And the chickens are scratching and they're spreading the poop around a little bit. And then they move them off, and then come pigs. And the pigs do the rooting and the mixing and the et cetera. And then by the time the grass is starting to grow again, here come the cows again. And it's a full circle, regenerative, fascinating way to grow. And of course, you've got to have a market for all three of these meat products and the eggs, which Salatin does. He's probably the best one at it. And a lot of people have copied him, including the Alexanders. They have these, their chickens live, they're pasture chickens, but they move them in these giant chicken tractor things. They're on wheels, and they use a tractor to pull a little house, and it's huge. I mean, my dairy guy, Clyde, he says you gotta walk behind the house and make sure all the chickens are coming. house, but you move these things to the next plot of land, and you just are constantly moving all of your animals around and around and around. And Salatin will explain why his grass is, in fact, he says he's a grass farmer, he's not a rancher. Alexander has to say the same thing. They're growing grass, they're not growing milk. So anyway, this is some of the number of things that that regenerative agriculture focuses on, including increasing biodiversity, enhancing ecosystem services, increasing resilience to climate change. Because obviously, like Blake said in his video, that's carbon being sequestered in the soil. And as long as you're not tilling it, and they don't need to, then that carbon stays. And it's one of the good ways to, in fact, Joel Salatin will say that he thinks that grass sequesters more carbon better than trees even do. He'll tell you that in his video. So basically, regenerative agriculture can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in respect to the numbers that have just come out, yes, I totally agree that ranching done irresponsibly with only an eye towards the bottom line and no care or concern about the land or the climate is definitely a bad thing and should be stopped. However, when you can capture atmospheric carbon dioxide using a regenerative agricultural plan, that in my mind is a win-win. We still need to cut back on our meat production and our meat eating, but this is one way to allow those who have to have that hamburger and the steaks. My husband's a meat and potatoes guy. A lot of men are. I shouldn't say most because there's 3 of you here. Maybe none of you are. A lot of men are. But that's one way to care about the climate and still be able to grow cows and pigs and chickens and the like. The other thing that I want to mention is when you're farming organically, you have inputs, you need to build up your soil regularly, and you can buy inputs in bags. We used to grow on a very small plot of land, and we used kelp as one of our inputs, or you can use animal manures, cows and chickens, etc. And so if we do away with all protein sources, then we also have to rethink how we're going to grow organically, because those inputs are needed. And a closed circuit, closed cycle, self-sustaining farm also includes animals on their farm for that very reason. Valley Flora farm in Langworth is a good example. So Zoe, she tills because they're a vegetable row crop kind of farm. So they can't do no-till. That's really hard to do when you're growing annuals. No-till is great for perennials and for ranching and like. So they have to till, but she uses draft horses. And so those horses obviously have a manure that they then build into their soil, and they have in their river bottom soil as well. And so they have some of the most beautiful soil ever imagined. And she rotates, and she has cover crops, and she does all of the things that are necessary to keep that soil healthy. So now that we're at this one's a longer one, and let me get it started, and then I've got to share a different screen. Hold on a second, stop. Share. Ads. Go. Okay. This one's about 15 minutes long, and this is Joel Salatin.
Sunbeams are the essence of poetry, dreams, fantasy, fairy tales, sunbeams. And yet, as esoteric and mystical as sunbeams are, they are the energy driver of the planet in a very visceral, physical, scientific, empirical sense. But if I asked you to go out and grab me some sunbeams, we know they're valuable, right? Well, grab me some. Could you bring them in here? Let's talk about sunbeams. Well, you know, children, they'll take you up on this. They'll dance around a little while and try to grab them, but they can't. The fact is that something as esoteric and mystical as sunbeams is captured by nature's photovoltaic array called photosynthesis in plants through the chlorophyll of plants, and specifically grass. So the problem is that most of us in our modern culture are quite disconnected from grass. When I say grass, people immediately think of lawns, golf courses, maybe a soccer field. But you're not thinking about the kind of grass that the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe found in the early 1700s when Governor Spotswood, the colonial governor of Virginia, sent his friends, dubbed the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, I mean, they were British after all, sent them across the Blue Ridge. The British had bumped up here against the Blue Ridge. What was over Afton Mountain? What was over there? So he sent them over to discover what was there. And what they found, they wrote back, and they spent a couple of weeks, and they said, everywhere we rode in the Shenandoah Valley, we could take the grass and tie it in a knot above the horse's saddle. It was a magnificent silvopasture of elk, deer, passenger pigeons, prairie chickens, pheasant, turkey, and bison, up to herds of 3 to 4 million. Captain Jim Bridger got behind a herd out in the Black Hills of Dakotas when he was sent out to explore it, behind 7 million bison. Now, that's always intrigued me. Can you, Lieutenant, could you come up here a minute, please? Sharpen your quill. Start counting. 1, 2, you got that? 2, 3, yeah. I have no idea, all right? But the legacy of these migratory herds that were moved by both natural and Native American lit fires as a landscape choreography, and these migratory patterns where they moved thousands of miles created the soils that we are currently mining today in the Midwest and that we already mined in Virginia, up to 3 feet of topsoil washed off of Virginia during the European colonialization of the state and up until today, and is still washing off today, because we have turned this beautiful perennial-based system into an annually based tillage system, which is highly erosive. In the Shenandoah Valley, where I live, arguably 3 to 5 feet of topsoil have washed out and created the turbidity in today's Chesapeake Bay. But how does nature actually work? How nature works is sunbeams come down, it's captured by photosynthesis and converted into biomass, into vegetable material. And if we look at the different kinds of plants, trees, bushes, and grass, intuitively we think, well, what's the most efficacious plant to collect these sunbeams and turn them into and sequester the carbon? Well, your mind tends to go to trees because you can see, oh, wow, look at all that biomass. But in actuality, trees are the least efficient. Brush is more efficient, bushes and brush and things like that. And then the pinnacle is grass. The fact is that when you look at a forest, you're seeing 50 to 80, maybe 100 years of stored carbon all standing visible. You're not seeing 80 years of grass visible at one time. Now, the grass goes through a growth cycle, just like us, just like all living things. It goes through a growth cycle. It starts slow, and then it accelerates, and then it goes into senescence. So the 3 stages of grass I call diaper stage. So right here in this pot, I have freshly eaten diaper stage. This is infant grass. It's just been grazed and it's coming back. Here I have teenage grass. Okay, juvenile fast growth grass. Remember when you could eat a half a gallon of ice cream and it didn't go on your hips? This is juvenile grass. And then we come into more juvenile, but you see it starting to brown down, and eventually it goes to what I call nursing home grass. Okay? Senescence, the end. The role of the herbivore in nature, if you've ever thought about it, and the reason I'm concentrating on this is because herbivores have gotten a bad rap in recent days. Cows, climate change, and all that stuff. You see, the data points to study the effect of cows on the environment are all coming from a position that does not respect and honor the herbivore in its classic role. The role of the herbivore, and the reason the planet is so full of herbivores, think about Africa, think about, South America, alpacas, think about Indochina, yaks. I mean, they're all over the place. Reindeer, caribou. There's a lot of herbivores, groundhogs, prairie, everything. Is because without them, this biomass would simply turn into senescent material and just volatilize and die and quit growing. So the role of the herbivore in nature is to take this as it approaches senescence, prune it back, just like a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard or an orchardist would prune an apple tree. Does anyone think ill of an orchardist? Why are you pruning your apple tree? No, we think that's good. We think that's good stewardship. And that's exactly what the herbivores did. So they pruned this back to restart this rapid biomass production. Without them, it stops. The whole program stops. Now the problem is, how do we duplicate this if we don't have migratory patterns? If we don't have 4 million buffalo in a herd, if we don't have 10 million wolves chasing them, if we don't have fire, if we don't have the magnificent, amazing choreography of nature, how do we duplicate this amazing principle that hydrated, built soil, fed, all the mycorrhizae and the actinomycetes and built the soils that we're still mining today? How do we duplicate that if we have a system of private land ownership and all that? Well, we do it with high-tech electric fencing. Space-age, microchipped electric fencing. It's almost invisible to the eye, and yet we can encircle a herd of 1,000 cows with almost an invisible wire that you would never see. I mean, visitors to our farm have to watch the wire. They walk into it, And so, it's practically invisible. But because it's such a strong psychological barrier, the cows learn, and they can see way better than us. In fact, they can see all the way around their heads. So, well, except for 30 degrees on their back end. So they can see this, they know it's there, and it allows us to duplicate this mobbed movement that they would have had in eons before we had private land. And so we call this mob stalking herbivorous solar conversion lignified carbon sequestration. And so as the biomass gets to this point, we prune it back with the herbivore, and then it begins to grow. And as the leaf area begins to get more and more chlorophyll, the growth accelerates and accelerates, so that from here to here is, let's just say for sake of discussion, from here to here, this time period is 20 days. From here to here, the time period is only 10 days. All right? So it's accelerating, and then it slows off. So what we're doing is using the herbivore, in this case a cow, it could be a sheep or a goat or whatever, but in this case a cow. We're using the animal in its historic role, using high-tech electric fencing in order to leverage and stimulate the biomass production. The bottom line is that in Augusta County, where I live, which is over the mountain, in Augusta County, the average pasture, the biomass production, if you dry it down and you weigh it, the biomass production on the average acre of grass in Augusta County is 2,500 pounds per year. On our farm, we've been there almost 60 years. We've never planted a seed. We've never bought a bag of chemical fertilizer. And on our farm, we average well over 10,000 pounds per acre. We're all familiar with the tension between ecology and economy, and that there's a battle, and we can't be environmentally sensitive unless we sacrifice the economy, and we can't be economically viable unless we sacrifice the environment. And I'm here to present to you the notion as a fact that we can actually have both. But what we have to do is manage things completely differently. You see, the data points that impugn the lowly cow as the destroyer of the planet have the wrong object to have a problem with. The problem is not the herbivore. The herbivore is doing what she's always done. She's, a four-wheel drive portable sauerkraut vat, turning carbohydrate, fermenting it into, meat and milk, nutrient-dense food. She's doing exactly what she was supposed to do. But she's not being managed the way the wild herds and the migratory patterns were managed, where they moved and they vacated areas long enough for the forage to go through this magnificent 50, 60, 70-day physiological expression cycle and then be pruned back and harvested at the appropriate time. In fact, what happens is that on most pastures, even at this, the grass never even can grow to this point. It's kept very, very short. So it's pruned 20 times in a season, and you add up all those little couple hundred pounds a time, and it comes out to about 2,500 pounds per year. Instead, we let the forage come way up here to full physiological expression. By denying access, we move the cows every day to a new spot, letting everything else rest and go through this rapid accumulation cycle. And what it means is that we triple, quadruple, and even quintuple the amount of forage that can be produced on a certain area. Now, that cow is dropping 50 pounds of goodies out her back end every day. So just think about what happens when you change it from 4,000 pounds of manure and urine per acre to 20,000 pounds of manure and urine per acre. Suddenly, you have soil building capacity. So here we are not only harvesting way more, but we're sequestering way more carbon. We're using the animal in its historic role. We're honoring and respecting the cowness of the cow. When you feed the herbivore foreign things like grain, and you lock them up in a feedlot, and you do all the kinds of desecrating things, I mean, the U.S. duh, I call it the U.S. duh, for 30 years, laughed at us for doing this. They said, grind up dead cows, feed them back to cows, and we were branded Luddites and anti-progressives, anti-science, Go on, get with the program, Salatin, what's this grass stuff? 40 years later, there's this sudden global, oops, maybe we shouldn't ought to done that. And it's beyond me why we still give these sophisticated agents of our culture the freedom to tell us what to eat and how to eat. And so, the what if of this, just imagine if all of our neighbors did this instead of continuous grazing, where they just turn 50 cows into 100 acres and just leave them all year, and the grass can never get above infant, what I call diaper grass, and it just sits there always kind of, in like half of first gear. And there's a lot of analogies we can make here, but the point is that the grass never accelerates. It can't, because are they ever going to get out of diapers? Well, it's the same way the forage is. But if we control it so that the animals only access a tiny little spot each day and create a mosaic pattern, guess what? Now we've got moles and voles. We've got bird nesting sites. We've got a continuous mosaic of pollination of blossoms, red clover, white clover, and dandelions that are for pollinators. You've got all sorts of growth going on below the ground, because now we have this biology. The soil cools down because it's got all this nice cool mulch that's transpiring, oxygenating, and I'm inhaling the oxygen out of this plant, and then and it's inhaling my carbon dioxide. I mean, isn't that cool? Okay, and tomorrow it goes through a frog, and then it goes into a goldenrod, and then it comes back in, and it's this wonderful connection. And so what if UVA would serve this kind of meat instead of the concentration camp meat? What if McDonald's served this? What if Burger King served this? What if you ate this? And what if I ate this as a blessed way to participate in the most healing, amazing, nurturing choreography of nature by respecting the cowness of the cow, using her as an herbivore in her historic role, and participating in the nurturing of the planet. Thank you for letting me share something that's very simple with you. Thank you so much.
The cowness of a cow. I discovered Joel Salatin, I don't know, 15 years ago. And he's got his, he's definitely a libertarian, folks. He is not a liberal. However, I don't care because his approach to agriculture is spot on. And there are a lot of ranchers and farmers kind of following in his footsteps. But he was, in my opinion, the first one to really, he has a way of speaking. He talks like I do. He goes off into these rabbit holes and he just goes off in his little tangents, and he forgets where he is right sometimes, and he can't remember the word even once. So that's how I talk to. So anyway, I thought you all would enjoy that. It's not, I mean, it applies to local food in that our own local ranchers and dairy farmers are, for the most part, practicing the same regenerative agriculture method. And that's the beauty of local food, is that they're generally small enough or they're transparent enough to be doing this kind of thing. They're not a giant CAFO that's, you know, thousands of acres, and then they're not hidden away behind chain link fences with, you know, with wire on top. And I mean, I'm not sure that's how it works, but that's how I envision it, because God forbid, I mean, if any of us saw how a lot of animals were really raised, I mean, it would turn our stomachs. We wouldn't eat meat ever again. This is the sort of meat I can eat and feel okay about, because it's respecting the cowness of the cow. And he also, you can tell he cares about his land, he cares about his animals too. And that's another thing about local food that makes a difference. Yes.
Did have one one question come up, and that was actually a request of sharing the,
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
URL.
Yeah, I'll definitely share. I'll share all three of these videos with you. And there's a lot more out there. I have a handout, as in I'll be emailing you a handout. We decided we're not going to print a bunch of paper and add to the waste of the world. And so we're going to email it to you. And so it's not completely finished yet, but I'll get it finished, and I'll just add these videos to it, so you'll all have access to all of this. And if you were to Google regenerative agriculture, you'd find all the ones I found. There's some really cool videos out there for people. So anyway, so here's where the gist of my talk comes to, is how does a person eat local? So steps to eating local. The first thing to learn, and this was kind of what I had to learn to start with, find out what fruits and vegetables grow well on the coast. So if you're from, okay, well, take me. I was from Wyoming, and so I ate grocery store food all the time. There was very little that grew locally that I knew of. And keep in mind, I'm 60 years old, so way back when, you know, we were in the throes of industrial agriculture for the years I was growing up, and nobody was worrying about locals or anything, local food. So I had no idea that a tomato could taste like it tastes if I waited to eat it until August. And so one of the first things you learn is you get to where you decide, okay, do I really want that tomato from the grocery store in December? Or do I want to just wait until it's truly seasonal and it's at its peak? And then maybe I should learn how to can them or dry them or freeze them. Well, we can't freeze tomatoes, but you know, or something. The point being that once you understand what grows well here, then you can start to shop locally and feel good about it. And you can also get used to the idea. It took me a few years to stop buying tomatoes from the grocery store. And there are only a few things I refuse to buy from the grocery store ever again. Peaches is another one. Strawberries is another one. Because you can't get the flavor that you get from food that's eaten in season. So you find out what grows well here. You talk to the farmers, go down to the farmer's market, and ask them, well, what are you all growing? Because I will say this, because we're in a part of the country where not a lot of the favorite things grow here, and I did this as well. Some of the food that's at the farmer's market isn't actually grown here. So do ask questions. For instance, when we were selling at the farmer's market, what grew here was things like chard, kale, kohlrabi, peas, things like that. But we were known for peaches. Well, we never grew the peaches here. I can't tell you how many times I said to somebody, they said, did you grow this here? No, gosh, no. Peaches don't grow well here. We get them from Meyer Orchards in Talent. And I would say that's within 150 miles. It's part of a local food shed, blah, blah, blah. So, ask questions of the farmers at the market. And there's one farm in particular, Ocean Air Farms down in Fort Dick. They have a farm stand. I would definitely make a trip out there to see them. I think they're open on Sundays, and I know they sell at the Crescent City Farmers Market on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Do talk to Pollan, Julie, Joe. They grow everything they sell. They grow, that I know for a fact. And talk to them and find out when is the season for strawberries and when do you grow green beans? What can you grow in the winter? What can I get in December and January and February? You'd be amazed at the food you can get there in January and February and March and December. Visit their websites. I think I've got a handout that includes all of the local farms that I work with in Curry and Del Norte. And so visit their websites, take a look at what they tell you there, call them up. They are happy to talk with you. These are people just like you and me. These are not big corporate bigwigs in some office in New York City. These are the farmers themselves, and they will talk to you and they'll tell you everything you want to know. And they're all very upfront and very honest and very transparent. And then Facebook pages is another one. A lot of our local producers don't have websites, but you can find practically every one of them on Facebook. You can't Google on Facebook, can you? Google it on Facebook. Then also ask your gardener friends. If you've got friends that have gardens that are growing food, the master gardeners in Gold Beach will help you. Ask people, what do you grow in your garden right now? Carrots, lettuce, definitely lettuce. You should never buy lettuce from a grocery store ever again, because you can get lettuce here 24/7, 365. Trust me, it's in some way, shape, or form. So that's just one of the things. Kale, chard, same thing pretty much. Then also our fisheries, we're coastal. So we have the advantage of having a local seafood shed. Yeah, seafood shed right out there. Go down to the port. I would start at Pacific Ocean Harvesters, or if you happen to be in Gold Beach, go to Fisherman Direct. They're great. That's who I work with. And just ask them, what's the season right now? What's coming in? Bay shrimp is I think still in season right now. Halibut probably just ended. Crab, of course, is a winter thing. Rockfish is pretty much year round. Get to know that. And then when the stuff's in season, if they have an email list, get on it. And when halibut's in, because halibut, I think, is like a week-long season, and you're a fan of halibut, my mother loved this stuff. Boy, is it pricey, but it's okay, because you only buy it once a year, and you buy about 5 fillets, and then you're good to go. And then get on their email list, and when it's in, go down and get it, and put it in your freezer. Go down to the boats. I know they still, at least one boat still sells off the boat on my crab season, I believe. Catalyst is another good place to go talk to, if Willie happens to be there, definitely. But find out from them what's in season, because they serve a lot of what they catch on their own boats. Father Bernie is a fisherman, FYI, talk to him, he can tell you. Anyway, so there, and I would, if it was me, if I didn't want to eat as much red meat for health reasons, I would definitely start stocking up on seafood, because folks, I mean, you can't get any better than this. And the stuff in the grocery stores, occasionally it will be local, but 9 times out of 10, it's not. So I would get used to Pacific Ocean Harvesters, Fisherman Direct, getting off the boats, check down at the market. I know Jerry, I can't think of his last name. Jerry sells tuna down there, and that's local. So, and a lot of it, the processing, if you're concerned about that, most of the processing is done in Charleston. So it's still kind of within our 100-mile range. Shop according to the seasons. So you learn when local foods are at their peak. You buy in bulk when it's at the height of its season. It tastes good. It's usually a little cheaper. And then you freeze it, you dry it, you can it. You do whatever. Freezing's easy, drying's fairly easy, canning's a little harder. I'm not a canning person. I had a friend who I would give her peaches and she would do all the work and we would split the proceeds, and boy, that worked well. So you buy in bulk. Right now it's strawberry season, and it's going to be strawberry season all the way into September because everybody who grows strawberries here on the coast grows seascape, and seascape is not a June bearer, an ever bearer. Stop for a sec. And ever bearers just mean that they're bearing fruit all season long, not a whole bunch at once like in June, like you might be used to, but all season long. And it actually gets better the warmer it gets here because strawberries love less water is better and more sun is great. We grew strawberries for a while, so I could speak with some confidence on those. Blueberries, it's blueberry season right now. So I know that Vanessa and Alan up the Chetco have been selling their berries at the market. I'm getting mine right now from Valentine Blueberries. That's up just past Langlois. Twin Creek Ranch Blueberries is on the cusp. They'll be starting about 2 weeks from now. Jensen is another you pick up there. They're the only certified organic blueberries. If you want organic, you can get them. And so blueberry season is usually about early July to the end of August. Learn all this stuff. I will also share with you a harvest calendar, which is specific to our area, keeping in mind that the starts and the ends of seasons are iffy, but the middle of it is usually spot on no matter what. So that'll help. Get to know your farmer. And then develop a taste for eating seasonally. So, you start looking for recipes that fit the season. And I got to say, folks, that most cookbooks, they don't take into account the seasonality of food in different regions. And so I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a recipe and it's called for, it's called for maybe tomatoes and peas. And peas, for the most part, are a spring crop and tomatoes are a summer crop. And it's like, okay, those two aren't generally growing at the same time of year. So why are you putting in a recipe? Look for local cookbooks. And speaking of that, wild mushrooms, I don't think I have it on this. Did I have it on the next page? Nope. So wild mushrooms are another fabulous food that we can get right here in our backyard. And the Mushroom Festival, let me plug it, on November 6th and 7th at the Chetco Activity Center, provided our COVID numbers don't get too much higher, is happening. And we are bringing speakers, 3 of whom have cookbooks. And they're going to be bringing some and signing. And so Chad Hyatt out of San Francisco is a chef, and he's in great demand all around. Langdon Cook is up in Seattle. He's an expert forager. And Trent and Christian Blizzard just moved from Colorado to Wisconsin, God knows why, but they did. And they've got a cookbook. Wild mushrooms, best thing to do there is to either join our mushroom club or buy in bulk. They do. Jerry down at the market sells his mushrooms. At least he used to, and he still does. Chanterelles are a very long season. Doug knows. Just get used to looking for them, and then buy a bunch of them. And I would dehydrate them or can them. Learn how. But anyway, so what can I do? One thing that Bill mentioned to me, he said, when it comes to trying to figure out what you can do to combat climate change as a single person, as a just me, what can I do? I can't do anything about the global problem. I can't force these companies to stop spewing smoke in the air and all that. But what I can do is I can learn to eat locally, and I can start small. So if you're used to, eating from the grocery store like I was, I was overwhelmed. I'm not going to change my entire diet overnight. My body wouldn't accept that. My mind wouldn't either. But you start small. So with me, I started with peaches. And I learned what flavor really was. And then I slowly found other foods that I could, switch to, that I could get used to not eating year round, or that I could get used to not getting whatever I wanted to. So you start small. You pick a few foods that you like, that are grown locally, and you start to buy only local. So, if you get to the farmer's market late and they're out of lettuce, well, okay, so figure out something different to do, but don't go to the store and buy lettuce. Just get used to buying it locally. That's one thing you can start out doing. Find out when the farm stands are open and get used to going out there. So, you know, a lot of friends I know, they make a weekly trip out to Ocean Air Farms farm stand on Sunday mornings and they shop there. You could carpool. I mean, I'm usually, well, I'm in church on Sunday morning, so I can't do it. I could go after. They're usually sold out. Ask questions at the local farmers markets to help you learn the local seasons. I mentioned it already. Buy your groceries through a food co-op. I wish we had a co-op in town. We don't, but Port Orford has a fabulous one. Wild Rivers Market down in Crescent City is a pretty good place. Henry at Freddy's, he's trying. He's got a few local foods, but he's a Kroger store, and so it's kind of hard for him to buy local. But he has, it's here. He really wants to. So I'm not going to say anything bad about Freddy's anymore because they got Henry now. Henry's a good guy. And then, you know, you could get an online collaborative. That's what OtterBees is. You could join the CSA. I don't think Ocean Air is still doing a CSA, but they may have some sort of market bucks thing. Check, you know, talk to them. And you can save some money doing that. Visit the seafood stores in the port, learn the local seasons, buy off the boat, ask your grocery store to carry more local food. So talk to Henry. He's wide open. He posts these fabulous Facebook posts about once every couple of weeks. And he'll sit down and have coffee with you. So do get to know him and start pushing him for more local food. Buy in bulk at the height of the season and plant a garden if you're a gardener. I mean, you should be growing chard. You should be growing your own chard, kale, kohlrabi, peas. You can definitely grow your own strawberries. Carrots are kind of hard to grow. Onions, green beans. What else is easy? Those are some of the lettuce, dill. I love salads too. I want to keep forgetting those. And then if you're into it, learn how to harvest. Not just mushrooms, but in the springtime, I know the mushroom pickers used to switch to miner's lettuce, which grows wild all along the roads. Stinging nettle is another thing that grows in the spring. You got to watch it because it stings when you pick it, but as soon as you boil it or dry it or preserve it in any way, it stops stinging. And it's a fabulous spring tonic. Dandelion greens. There's huckleberries in the fall. There's blackberries, of course, salmon berries, thimbleberries, salal berries are edible. Bird tips are edible. I've never tried them, but they are. So there we go. And I think, final thought. So remember I said that, you know, I'm not an expert on climate change, and there are a lot of different reasons besides just worrying about the climate to eat local. This is one of my favorites. That's a picture of Valley Flora, by the way. That's Zoe and mom Betsy and sister Abby and two of the grandkids, and that's Roberto and I forgot her name. She's not there anymore. One of their helpers. Anyway, if you spend $10 a week on local foods, you can build your local economy. This number was from about 15 years ago. If each household in Curry spent $10 a week on local food, it would mean over $3.5 million a year generated and available for local reinvestment. And then the last quote is from Barbara Kingsolver. Another fabulous book is Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year of Food Life. Barbara's normally a fiction writer, but this was nonfiction and it's really good. Corporations don't care about us. They're in it for the money. Of course, that's their job. They're corporations and they have shareholders and their motive is always only profit. B Corps are a little better, but for the most part, locally grown, you're working, if not direct with the grower, farmer, producer, then one step removed, like somebody like me or somebody at the farmer's market that's selling their own stuff plus a few other things. You're still a lot closer to your food, where it's grown, how it's grown, what's grown and why, than you ever would be before. And I love this. She says, local food is a handshake deal in a community gathering place. Local is farmers growing trust. And that's what I have believed for ever since I moved here. Local food is the way to go. Now that climate change is even more scary and we're still not doing enough. This is one thing that y'all can do that will at least make you feel like you're doing a little something and what it's worth. And that is the end of that.
Well, thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I will notice that, Randy, you've put a bunch of things in the chat.
Oh, look at that.
And there's
Yeah,
a lot
I
to-
wanted to make sure everybody saw that because she was talking about CSA and I'm like,
Oh, yes.
it's right here.
That's
Yeah,
right,
I
look at
just
this.
got an email from the DNATL, that's the Delnor and Tribal Lands group that teams up with the Wild Rivers Permaculture Guild, and they send out all kinds of emails, and they sent out a survey to ask about how people wanted to operate the community supported agriculture. That I think that they're teaming up with several farms and people that are, you know, whatever it is that everybody's got, the information's right there for what they're probably going to have, and they'll be doing it pretty soon. It looks like they're kind of getting it organized, and I imagine if it goes well over these 3 months through September through and fall, that they'll keep it going because they've got enough stuff, hopefully, that, you know, they can harvest and keep it going. But I think they're doing this trial run to kind of see how well it does. That's why it's like we need to talk about this and get people going on it so that it does well and we keep it going.
I'm glad you mentioned it, Marina. Marina. I saw that email in my inbox last week sometime, and it's really exciting because Ocean Air used to have a CSA share box, but they changed their method, and now they do the farm stand and the farmers markets, and I think they have market bucks. We used to have a CSA as well, but we moved more towards online retail, and because was getting physically really hard for us. So when I saw this information about Donato doing this, it's like, cool, that's great. And you don't have to be a tribal member, right? They're open up to pretty much anyone, I think.
Yeah, and the Wild Rivers Permaculture Guild's actually on Facebook. They have a more closed group that is the like the direct guild members and the people that are kind of running the show. And then there's a larger group that's like 120 something people that basically just get on and discuss permaculture stuff. And a lot of those people are all connected and communicate with each other a lot, and they're all doing this stuff. So it's a really good resource if somebody needs information. Drea, I think, is one of the ladies that works more directly with them. She sends out a lot of the emails, and there's several people from the guild that keep all of this going. So there's quite a few resources for information if someone wants to find out more about it.
Yeah, thanks for adding that in here. You can save that, right? Yeah.
Now,
Questions? Yes.
when you say CSA, can you explain a little bit
Yes,
more about
sorry.
that?
See, you know, when you live in the world of acronyms, you forget sometimes, not everybody knows. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. CSF stands for Community Supported Fisheries. So Port Orford Sustainable Seafood in Port Orford has a CSF program. I believe that they only come down as far as Port Orford. I think they focus more on north and inland to Eugene, but I'm sure you could find out more information from them. CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, Ocean Air had theirs, was a single farm, and basically you buy, the way it is you buy a share of the farm. They sell 50 shares, 100 shares, however many they think they can support. And then it starts, say June, runs for 26 weeks. Every week you get a box of produce. The farmers decide what you're going to get. It's whatever is growing well that they've got enough of. A traditional CSA works like that. And there's no trading or switching or anything. You get what you take what you get, and you learn how to use it. It's a really neat program for a lot of people. Our CSA was slightly different because we were not fabulous farmers. We had never, I've got a black thumb, I'll tell you what, my husband was better. But we knew all these great farms and these growers. And so we crafted a multi-farm CSA based on a CSA I knew of in the Applegate Valley called the Siskiyou Co-op. And so we gathered food from, started out with 3 farms. At the end, I think we were gathering from like 10 places. We grew some of it too. And then we would put it all together in a box. Our CSA was a little more flexible. We would allow some trading because we realized soon that, not everyone wanted kale every other week, and I got pretty creative about knowing how many weeks of corn before people were sick of corn, or how many times I could get away with giving everyone kale before I had to switch to something else. And so that's how we did it. And then Valley Flora Farm in Langlois, they do shares as far down as Gold Beach, I believe. But we also carry their produce too. And they have members in Coos Bay, Bandon, Portal, Gold Beach. And they're a traditional CSA as well. So you get your box, you buy a share. They do a summer and a winter. And their winter CSA is an every other week thing. And then summer is every week. And summer starts, I think, the end of May and goes all the way to end of October. No, it goes into November, I think. So there's some options. There's a lot more options for CSA when you move into a place like the Willamette Valley, where there's a ton of farms. Every farm has their own CSA. But here we're fortunate to have at least options like that. And then, like I mentioned, the Wild Rivers market is a good place for local food, and then the co-op as well. Somebody needs to start a co-op in town, that's all I can say. There was one here, we moved here when it closed. So,
Any other questions?
questions?
Regard to farmers and ranchers, problems with tilling, he mentioned was soil runoff. Are there other problems from disturbing the soil? Is that the main one?
There are other issues. I mean, if you picture the soil as a living thing, which it is, then you also can picture the tilling tearing up that life and harming it to a certain extent, especially the fungi, the mycelium that's flowing throughout the soil. So the ideal way is to till as little as possible, to cover crop all the time. Like Valley Flora, when they finish a field, because they rotate also, and that keeps pest problems down. So they'll rotate out on a field, and maybe they'll cover crop it for the entire winter, because they're gonna they cover crop it with like a clover, which fixes nitrogen, because then the next spring they're gonna grow corn, because they do grow an organic corn there. And they need a lot of nitrogen in the soil because corn is a heavy feeder of nitrogen. So they will plant that clover, and then they'll leave it all winter long. And then when they get ready to do their corn, they'll go through and rough till it, so to speak, but they won't clear it or anything. And then they'll plant their corn. And that, I mean, it's still going to kill some things in the soil, but that's a fairly low invasive way of doing it. What's not helpful is to be digging up your soil and cleaning it of everything, you know, every time you turn around, and constantly having bare soil. That's a real problem. The living organisms have to have something to eat, and what they're eating is what's in the soil. Either they're feeding off the roots, or they're feeding the organic matter. That's what the mycelium's doing. You know, it's eating that organic matter and breaking it down. But no till is ideal. When I lived in Indiana, we rented a farmhouse out in outside of Lebanon, and the guy was he grew feed corn one year and soybeans the next, and the soybeans fixed the nitrogen, and the feed corn it was all no till. And so I loved feed corn years, because the corn would get like this, you know, knee high by the 4th of July and all that, and it would be like a jungle back there, because our backyard was like this, and this was corn. But then in the other years there would be soybean there. And that worked for him, and he never tilled at all. So, you know, it was one way to do it. I don't know if all the farmers did it like that. I wasn't paying attention to farming then. I just enjoyed corn. So does that answer?
Yes, very much so.
I found it interesting, the comment about the animal concentration camp.
Yes, the capitals. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does not, you can tell Joel has a very low opinion of the way our agriculture, our food system works. He has always been very outspoken, and he's made a lot of enemies. It's funny, because I would love to meet him someday, but if I ever met him, I have a feeling we would not get along politically, but we would definitely have common ground when it comes to food and food systems. And that's the main reason because he calls the USDA the US duh. I'm like, he would know. I mean, he has to work with them. I don't. So I guess I would go with that.
The question is where that will work. I mean, in this area where you don't really get the colder temperatures, you have a pasture that's sustainable. As you move inland, I suspect Medford, you get the colder temperatures, and you're not going to be able to pasture. year round. And at some point you have to corral up.
Yeah, I
Or
think-
concentration camp up
Yeah.
to a degree. And if you're trying to be local, think about what parts of the country could actually have those products if they were solely local,
Mhm.
using those methods.
Mhm.
It limits your,
It does. The Midwest, I'd have a hard time seeing regenerative agriculture. However, I did find a video from a rancher in, and he's also become quite famous. I think he's in Minnesota. And he uses a regenerative agriculture method, and he's been using it for years. So I'll share that with you, and you can take a look and see if there's ways around that.
I think there's, all farmers can do some degree of regenerative.
Yeah.
The question is, how far can you take it?
Right, right. And I know that this guy that I'm thinking of, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was talking about how they also, they grow their own feed. And so they've developed this closed circle type of operation that allows them to make it economically viable and still keep it as climate change friendly, as climate friendly as possible. That was his thing as well, was he was trying to steward his land in the best way possible. But he's from somewhere in the Midwest. I think it's Minnesota. So I'll share that on my handout. And, you know, I mean, it does, eating local does make it, I mean, we're kind of lucky because we're right here in the ocean, so we can have all the seafood we want. But you go into South Dakota or Wyoming and it's like, you know, well, lake trout maybe, but you can't really do seafood. So the idea behind eating local also allows, and being a locavore also allows for people to make their choices about the exotic foods they want to continue to use, like coffee. If I was ever told to give up coffee, I would stop being a locavore because I cannot give up coffee. And we all know coffee doesn't grow here. We do have local roasters who get their beans from fair trade and shade-grown coffee farms down, plantations down in like Mexico or wherever it is. And then they bring it up here and they roast it. So in that respect, I'm okay with that right now, but I gotta be honest, if we continue to ignore the damage we're doing to this earth, the time's gonna come when I'm gonna have to give up coffee because I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror and say I'm doing my part when I'm not really doing my part. If it gets as bad as it could get, and let's hope it doesn't, you know, but so if you're in South Dakota and you just absolutely love shrimp, then you choose to get your shrimp preferably from somewhere in the United States. But you allow yourself that. And so it's not meant to be, what's the word I want?
Compulsory.
That or penalizing, that's not the word, but we don't want to feel like, well, I know there's a lot of complaining about how we're all gonna have to give up so much to make to deal with this climate change. And I think that there are ways that we can, there are some things we don't have to necessarily give up or do without. But there's also a lot to be said for looking at your lifestyle and thinking to yourself, okay, where can I make some changes that will make me feel better about doing my part. For me, it's eating local. You know, I should be down on the beaches cleaning up trash, but I don't do that. I should be maybe, what else could I should have solar. I really should have solar. And I want it badly, but I can't get it yet. I can't afford it, so I eat local. But I don't want eating local to become something that makes people feel like they're giving up or they're doing without, or they're, you know, like in the 70s when we had to turn our thermostats down and they changed the speed limit. Thank you. Speed limit. My dad threw a fit when they changed it to 55 because we used to go out to New England every other year to see his family, and that's a 2,000-mile drive, and we'll drive all night because they changed the stupid speed limits.
I think your point is very, very good. And I mean, Karen and I were talking about that earlier this afternoon, that we need to do what we can, but don't fall prey to what the Republicans will say, oh, you have to give up on watching TV because you can't get the lights on. You can't stop eating any beef. You can get 9 pounds a year, which came from a study that was ever referenced. And so it's do what you can, educate people, learn what you can do, take an honest assessment of things.
Yeah.
But if we all play together, work together, and recognizing that all these carbon dioxide emissions, as I'm talking, I'm emitting carbon dioxide. So if you really want to take it to the extreme, die, but don't decompose.
Exactly.
So anyway,
Or let the mushrooms decompose you. They have, that's the one method that they're doing nowadays.
and there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So it puts it back, it's closed circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly. So, you know, I give to certain entities that I think are doing the kinds of things I can't do personally, but I know they're doing. And, you know, I've looked at my own lifestyle. I'm slowly doing away with plastics, plastic bags, you know, that kind of thing. And eating local is just one more thing that just, it feels good and it's yummy. It's much better than some of the stuff. And I'm not saying don't ever go to the grocery store either. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm a Lay's potato chip fanatic and I have to stop myself from going in the store because man, they're fattening. But you know, they don't come from here and they never will. So, you know, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying, think about what you can eat that's local and then start there. And then slowly but surely you'll get used to not eating so much processed food. It's better for your health.
And I've got homegrown peas here, which are, well, we have a problem because our dogs love them. Yeah, we'll go out and find that they're part of the pea left because they can only eat part of it. So it's like you can get even dogs to eat things you didn't expect.
Seymour, I get a 5-pound bag of carrots from Locavore every now and then because it's cheaper. And I'm trying to lose some weight, so carrots are one of the things. So Seymour loves carrots, and I thought it was the dip I was dipping it in, but last night I'm eating them without me dip, and he still wanted some. So I'm like, that's my dog Seymour.
Yeah.
In case you figured that out.
Kathleen, we've a little bit over 7.
Oh, cool.
I very much appreciate your effort, your talk,
Sure.
everything, the videos. That was great, and I'm sure I speak for everybody that was on the Zoom. And Linda or Colleen, Rita, you've given some comments. I don't know, Linda or Colleen, if you had anything else, any questions? Otherwise, unless
Colleen says
everybody
no.
here- Otherwise,
Linda knows all of this. She's been a customer of ours forever, so she knows all this because it's been my mantra for years. Right, Linda?
Cool. All right, well, with that,
Okay.
I want to say thank you very much. I'll stop the recording and we'll see, let's see, stop here. And